ile pesa imelipwa ni bilioni 7. Na hiyo pesa bilioni 7 ambayo imelipwa haijapotea kwa sababu tuko na mpango ya sawasawa.
With a lot of hidden costs. And when it is that, there's a lot of interest.
The Ministry of Health has confirmed the first coronavirus case in Kenya.
The pandemic's devastating impact has caused the deepest economic recession in nearly a century.
The early years of President Uhuru Kenyatta's second term in office were years of reckoning with a number of issues. The destabilizing impact of violence in the wake of 2 2017 elections, a political marriage that was on its way to its end. But in the marrow of Kenya's problems lay debt-fueled growth. The intentions behind the debt that was sold as an attempt to build the infrastructure for Kenya's future growth. But the details behind some of these debts were coming back to haunt the regime.
If you look at the debt that we have incurred, and if you look at this language of the business, of we talk about economy, is infrastructure. Now, infrastructure, if you're building this sort of infrastructure, their main benefit is to increase efficiency. But now that railway, it has not attracted any new investment. So there is a connection, direct, between their personal business benefits and the borrowing.
In the previous episode of this series, we began looking into a project that typified political conflict and entrenched interests, the construction of the Kimwarer and Arror project. It began as a public-private partnership. Public-private partnerships typically are projects funded and built by private entities who own the project and recoup their investments via rents from the project. For instance, in the Kimwarer and Arror project, the investment made was to be recouped by charging for electricity generated from the dam and for water supplied to nearby communities. But somehow, the dams became a project that the government chose to finance with money borrowed from international banks.
Within 8 months, if they have not signed any contract, the whole deal expires. But in 2017, that was almost 1.5 years later, a contract agreement was signed, a joint venture with the KVDA. The whole contract changed. Apart from the tender number, the conditions which were in the tender document were forgone.
We pick up the story with a closer look at the eventual winners of the tender. The tender was won by 2 companies who bid as a joint venture, CMC di Ravina and Itinera, both companies registered in Italy. Intesa Sanpaolo is the bank that was supposed to guarantee the loan that CMC would take to complete the project. That was in 2015 when the project was first mooted. Then in 2017,
they came here and were registered under Companies Act as CMC di Ravena Joint Venture branch, Kenya branch. These 2 are different companies. This is a joint venture where each and every one retains its owner. The other one has been registered far much after the contract has been entered. Therefore, when we budget for payment of CMC di Ravena Itinera joint venture, we are budgeting for which contract? Which contract? KVDA never advertised the contract we are talking about. We never awarded this kind of a contract. We never advertised this kind of a contract.
And yet we're paying for it.
Yet, we have taken a loan based on an inexistent contract.
it may seem like a small detail. After all, the 2 CMC di Ravinas have similar ownership, right? There may have been other reasons that CMC chose to register locally. In 2019, a parliamentary committee was formed to look into the status of the dams in Kenya. One of the projects it looked into was the construction of the Itare Dam. The Itare Dam project was commissioned around the same time that the Kimwarer and Arror projects were floated, under the same joint venture, where Intesa Sanpaolo and a consortium of other banks would finance the project. This is a press release from Intesa Sanpaolo Bank's website detailing the same. However, in 2018, the Itare project stalled. It emerged that CMC de Ravina's mother company, based in Italy, had begun the process of filing for bankruptcy in Italy. As per the report, CMC de Ravina's certificate for the amount of works progressively began decreasing, a sign that its financial position may not have been what it claimed it was. In early 2019, de Ravina filed for bankruptcy in Kenya as well. De Ravina blamed the government for not providing the right kind of exemptions around land and access for the slow progress of its work, but its projects in Uganda would also suffer the same fate in 2021. But did Kenya lose money from the deal?
You know, there would have been nothing wrong to borrow for Arror and Kimwarer. But the way we went about it and introducing somebody to come quasi private, quasi what, and with a lot of hidden costs. And you know, when it is that, you know, there's a lot of interest, and it also opens us to be gullible.
Yeah.
Do you get me?
Yeah.
So you end up thinking the setup, you know, we were not very serious about the delivery.
21 billion shillings is suspected to have gone down the drain in a scandal involving 2 dams.
A witness in the Arror and Kimwarer corruption case told the court that former President Uhuru Kenyatta signed the project implementation papers for the dams on the 4th of August 2009 while he was Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Trade and Industry Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya's witness statement to DCI detectives on the awarding of multi-billion shilling tenders for the Arror and Kimwarer dams ease the link connecting investigators to top suspects.
Munya's statement revealed he was receiving pressure from a senior government official to release more funds for the construction of the 2 dams.
Fiscal accountability.
The devil in this and other projects financed by debt is in the details. Here's what you'll need to be paying attention to with the Kimwarer and Arror deal: the insurance payments. As part of the new deal between Kenya's government and CMC de Ravina, the government was to make an insurance payment on the loan that was being advanced. This utilization request lays bare how much the premium was: a staggering 52 million euros for a loan of 319 million euros, 16% of the total cost of the loan.
Remember the outburst that was there against the then Deputy President when he said that in any case, no money has been lost.
Ile pesa imelipwa ni bilioni 7. Na hiyo pesa bilioni 7 ambayo imelipwa haijapotea kwa sababu tuko na mpango ya sawasawa.
What was that money for, if Kenyans ever bothered, other than we are too quick to point fingers without looking at the facts? Most of that money has gone into insurance. Just use your investigative journalism to find out who was the insurer. Why was that insurance money never recalled back?
The insurer was SACE. SACE is Italy's insurance cum credit export agency company whose mandate is to support Italian businesses around the world. It is 100% controlled by Italy's Ministry of Economy and Finance. This is an important detail. Remember, the deal began as a public-private partnership, then was converted to a debt-driven project. The only government agency involved in this deal on the Italian side is SACE. The financing of the loan, essentially the core element of the deal, was done by a consortium of private banks, led by Intesa. So whereas Kimani Ichung'wah is certain about the credibility of the deal,
you have financing, ready financing. And there's nothing opaque with the Italian engagement with the Kenyan government. Unlike the SGR one, these are open contract.
A side note here, Kimani Ichung'wah may not be correct. The contracting details of the Kimwarer and Arror projects were not made public until the court case involving them began.
First of all, we brought in almost the same thing, government to government. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Which I've told you. What will be government to government will be the ministry of so-and-so. I've signed with the ministry of so-and-so. Yeah. That's it, not through a private or a parastatal body signing. Do you understand? Yeah. That's the only thing we should call it. Those are the only things. But then when it came to that, now you see the fiasco we got into.
After the insurance payment was made, Kenya's government began accessing the loan underwritten by this insurance and began making payments to settle it. They were only stopped once suspicion arose over the deal itself. Today, those projects are back on track. Between the time that the Kimwarer and Arror dams were commissioned to the time that they were stopped in 2019, Kenya's debt had soared from 4.1 trillion shillings to 5.6 trillion shillings. By this time, government borrowing was in overdrive to keep the country afloat, and it was clear that the government was doing the very thing it wasn't supposed to be doing, borrowing to fund recurrent expenditure. But just when things felt like they couldn't get worse,
The Ministry of Health has confirmed the first coronavirus case in Kenya.
the COVID-19 virus made landfall in the country. Over the course of a few months, the entire global economy was reeling from the impact of the movement restrictions imposed to stem the spread of the virus. The country's only lifelines lay in the International Monetary Fund. Then, the country's most expensive pastime, the general election, came 2 years later. And the wheels had all but come off by the time that the new government came into power. What did it choose to do?
You are going to technically run the entire government on borrowing. Now what you see with the finance bill is saying, no, we don't want to borrow so much. Neither do we want to cut our expenditure.
We are going to tax you.
We are going to tax you. But they are not answering the question of, but our incomes have not changed.
Yeah.
And those incomes don't look like they are going to change because you're already making the cost of doing business higher.
And we are in a global cost of living crisis.
Precisely. The best thing at this point, for instance, would have been to say, hey guys, we will all take a haircut together. We in government, we cut our expenditure.
Yeah.
But you Kenyans, pay your taxes.
More and more debt, ostensibly to finance government operations, and a tax regime that threatens to make life even harder. All the while, corruption has been left to fester.
How much of Kenya's current debt crisis do you owe to corruption?
I mean, you're asking me a ballpark, something back of the envelope calculation. We are now at almost 9 trillion. I think it's about, in fact, 50%.
Half of our debt?
Yeah, I think so. Given that a part of it is now interest on top and nothing is on the ground for it.
Kenya's options at this stage are few. It must raise debt to fund its agenda, raise its revenue to pay debt and finance its operations, and deal with corruption in order to plug the holes in Kenya's leaking bucket. It is a narrow and difficult path, but one that Kenya can navigate. Kenyans have, after all, emerged from indebtedness before.
We need to reconfigure our fight against corruption. In my view, we need to look at a system which can foresee, predict, and deter.
But hopes that the government can and will steer the country in the right direction may be fading with every passing day. Will William Ruto's government succeed? There's only one way to find out, and that way will become clear over the next few years. In response to questions about the size of the insurance premium that Sache charged the Kenyan government, Sache responded, saying that they used the OECD's country risk classifications, which measure a country's credit risk and the likelihood that a country will service its external debt. The index uses a scale of 8 risk categories to determine a country's credit risk. Kenya has an index rating of 7.